Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have Clay Bundy of Clay Bundy Outfitters off the Arizona Strip. Clay, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to, I've been wanting to have you on the podcast. I was able to finally meet you in person up at the Western Hunting Expo up there in Utah in Salt Lake City, and it was nice to meet you. We've got a lot of mutual friends, and thought before these Arizona applications for deer are due here kind of second week in June, I figured it'd be a good time to get you on and talk a little bit about the Arizona mule deer up there on the Arizona Strip. So I'm anxious to have a conversation with you today.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be part of this, and it was nice meeting you, and I just love mule deer, and that's what I live for. And so I'd love to talk to you about it.
That sounds awesome. Clay, you and your family have been up on that Arizona Strip country for many, many years. I've had Breck Bundy, whom I think maybe is a nephew or some relation to you.
He's a cousin of mine.
Cousin. Okay, yep. Cousin. And before we get into talking about mule deer, let's talk a little bit about history of your family up there on the Arizona Strip. Maybe talk about your father, your grandfather. How far back do you guys go up there on the Arizona Strip?
Okay, so my grandfather and his father, my great-grandfather, came to the Strip in 1916, and they homesteaded right there at Mount Trumbull, right there where the schoolhouse is, and everybody calls it Bundyville. The Bundys called it Mount Trumbull, and so my grandfather homesteaded there, and then my father bought the place from his mother after my grandfather had died, and my father has run it until 2 years ago he passed away, and so now my brothers and I are continuing to run the ranch. And my father loved ranching, but he loved hunting, and that was a part of my life growing up. I've hunted out there since I was 10 years old. I've had a tag every year except for 2 years during those times, and we just we love deer meat. We love not just the rack, but we love to eat it. And my dad would, when he was running the ranch, would always talk cows. But every time we talked to him, he'd talk deer to us, because he'd tell us what he'd seen, and he knew of my love for deer and his also love. He used to, when he was a young man, guided people over on the Kaibab, and also when I was a young kid growing up out on the Strip, I actually went to the school out there until I was in third grade, and
wow.
And so we, as young kids, there was hunters that would come by and ask my dad to take them, and a lot of times there wasn't really any money involved, but they'd give him a gun or something and there was some cool guys that we got to meet over the years, and so that's kind of what got me going in deer, and my dad not only loved deer, I think he almost loved sheep as much as he loved deer, but we just have always loved to hunt. And we're ranchers, and a lot of times people think, well, ranchers and hunters don't really get along, but that wasn't the case in this situation with my dad, because we loved to hunt as much as we loved to ranch, and we take good care of our land for not only for our cows, but for our deer, too, or wildlife. So,
Absolutely. Clay, what was your dad's name?
Orvel, Orvel. And that was important to him.
And then your grandfather, what was his name?
His name was Roy Bundy, and my great-grandfather was Abraham.
Okay. So Orville was your dad, and he just passed away a couple years ago, but he really instilled the love of hunting. It sounds like when you were young, you would be out there on the ranch, but you would be hunting from the age of 10 on with your dad. One question I would have is, in your lifetime that you've seen, what is the difference now on the Arizona Strip to say when you were 10 years old as far as deer numbers? Was there more then? Is there more now? What is the difference between, say, when you were around 10 years old and now?
Well, so when I was 10, so I was born in 59, so that would be 69. There was quite a few deer at that time. It almost like there was right in the 50s and 60s. There was a lot of deer, but then they something happened, and I don't know whether it was a disease. I mean, they did have a lot of tags, but I don't know what happened to the does. And so then there was in my teenage years, there wasn't a lot of deer out there. You could go up on Mount Logan, and if you see a couple deer, you felt like you'd been successful. And a few years ago, probably 10, 15 years ago, they did a big, they burned a lot of that country up in them ponderosas underneath them, and then it allowed for more summer country. The Arizona Strip has some of the best winter country in the world, but we don't have very good summer country for the does to give enough milk to raise 2 fawns. And when they did that work up there on Mount Logan, it allowed for more fawns to make it. And there's more deer now than there was 15 years ago.
Okay. And
I almost think I've said a lot lately that we right now we are living in the good old days.
So the good old days for the Arizona Strip are right now.
Right now.
As far as deer numbers and what have you, these are the good old days. With that being said, though, Clay, back, some of the old black and white photos, and I'm going to guess they're from, the 40s, 50s, maybe early 60s. You see some photos of some great big deer that had been shot out there. Do you feel like, as far as quality of bucks, that the last, say, 15, 20 years that we are in the heyday of the Arizona Strip? Or do you feel like, as far as big deer, back in the 50s was the best time?
I really believe it's now. And there was a big deer killed then, but not. I mean, you look at 2010. There was there was 20 bucks over 220 killed.
Yeah, incredible.
With only 150 tags in those 2 units, where back in the 40s and 50s it was unlimited. There was thousands of California people that came up here, and Utah people that came out there and hunted. You know what I mean? Just thousands and thousands of people, according to my dad. And so I really believe, today is the good old days, and it's not just because I think there was plenty of big deer back then, probably just as big a deer, but nowadays we have better optics, we have better trucks, better machines to get around, we have cameras, we have more people to help us. People seem to have more time now to hunt. And I'm not saying that we're better hunters now, but I think we are a little better because of what we have to hunt with.
Yeah, the equipment for sure makes a big difference. When it comes to cattle and I assume a lot of that land up there is BLM, and I would assume some of it's state and maybe even some forest land. But as far as cattle, you guys are primarily cattle grazers. Give the listeners kind of an idea of twofold: either A, kind of the amount of range that you guys cover now, and then maybe second part is your grandfather and father, the amount of range that they covered then. Meaning, do you and your brother, do you cover the same territory, or was it bigger, or are you guys, covering more ground now, or at one time did you cover more ground with your cattle then?
We actually covered the same country that my grandfather had. And we have probably similar amount of cows. The improvements we have done is, incredible. As far as waters, railing trees, different things to improve the range for our cows, which in turn also helps the wildlife. And so there's others that have less or more than what we do, but we kind of stayed about the same area of land that we run on. I mean, there's about 30,000 acres of land that we run our cows on, and
so those 30,000 acres. I mean, your grandfather, your father, now you run. I mean, obviously the Arizona Strip is bigger than 30,000 acres, but the area that you run your cows on is 30,000 acres of land. And what you're saying is the improvements over the years with all the different water catchments, dirt tanks, etc., windmills, I would assume, not to mention, the juniper you mentioned, that I believe the chainings and knocking some of the juniper infestation down, has created more opportunity for cattle to graze. But in your mind, without a doubt in your mind, has it also created a lot more habitat for the deer and other wildlife?
Absolutely. And if you go to a chaining or a knockdown, wherever you are, what they call it, we call it a chaining out here, is that's where the deer are. That's where, if you want to glass them up, that's where they are. And especially a new area that's been treated, that's where the wildlife are. That's where the cows like. That's where the new growth. It's just where, if you want to see a herd of bucks in the when they're growing their horns, you want to go to a chaining, because that's where they're going to be. And so it's just the improvements we've done and other ranchers have done have just, it helps us, but it helps the wildlife. The ponds, one thing I also do out here on the Strip is I build wildlife drinkers for the Arizona Fish and Game. And over the years, I've watched these waters, and if there is a dirt pond in the within a mile of a wildlife drinker, they will go to the dirt pond rather than the wildlife drinker because it's safer. And so it's it's important for me, for listeners, to realize that ranchers do so much for wildlife, and sometimes it's not realized quite as much as it should be, I think. And
for sure.
We don't want anything for it. We just want, we just love wildlife too, and we're glad to be able to help improve the wildlife.
For sure. Absolutely, and having that, sometimes there's a misconception between sportsmen and ranchers, and I think that's what you're alluding to, and it's always nice to point out that a lot of ranchers, I'm a rancher's grandson, a a lot of ranchers, my grandfather's friends and what have you, maybe if they don't hunt themselves, a lot of their families do, and they love seeing the deer and the turkey and, the elk in other parts of the state and what have you as well. Going back, so I've been by the quote unquote Bundyville, and you kind of laugh. I hear in your voice when you said the Bundys don't call it Bundyville, but a lot of other people do. So it's been nicknamed Bundyville because a lot of the Bundys reside right there. And I remember going by the schoolhouse and actually going in the schoolhouse. It's been a number of years. So when you say you went there in third grade, the actual schoolhouse that's right there by where your family house is that the schoolhouse that you went to school in third grade?
Yes. So I went there until third grade, and my older brother went there until fourth grade, and then there wasn't enough students, and they closed it down, and so then we had to come to St. George's School. But so right in that place, it was still standing, and when I got older, I've done a lot of construction, and we rebuilt it and made it really nice again, and then a bunch of animals burned it down. And
that's horrible. When did that happen? That's horrible.
That was probably 20 years ago. And so what they did is I had all the measurements and everything, and so then we rebuilt another one right in the exact same spot. All the had all the windows and everything, and so
so the one I've actually been in is within the last 10 years. That's actually a rebuilt kind of rebuilt what you remember as the school house, and so that's not the actual schoolhouse, but it's in the same exact location.
Same dimensions. Everything's in the same spot. The old one used to have a wood stove right in the center of it, with a stovepipe going out. But other than that, everything's exactly the same. And it was really kind of a sad deal that they did it, and because for my kids and my grandkids now, the fun part when we head to the ranch is when you drop off that McCain Hill coming, that's when you can see the schoolhouse, and it's always a race to see who can see the schoolhouse, the first. And so, so when I was there was eight students in the school, and
that's pretty neat.
One teacher.
Wow, that's pretty neat. So Clay, the area that you run your cows, you're right there on the border of 13A and 13B. In speaking specifically about your permit or whatever where you run your cows, is it in A and in B, or is it just in one unit?
No, it's in both. Our summer country is in A, right there on top of the Hurricane Rim. And we have 3 pastures up there. Then right as you come off the dugway down towards the schoolhouse, there are ranch houses there, and we have about 3 sections of private property right there. And then we take our cows down in Whitmore Canyon to the south of there, and the Grand Canyon, the actual canyon is our fence on the south side of that. So our cows are right down next to there. It's a level up from the river, but so it's a 2-day cattle drive to take them down there and then bring them back. And so it's been a. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that area obviously is a huge ranching area, but correct me if I'm wrong. It also used to be a huge area for sheep as well. My question is there still sheep that run in that country?
Domestic sheep?
Yeah, domestic sheep.
No, there's not. Like when they were, when my dad, he said he could remember when he was a young man going up Main Street there, he used to herd sheep for Roland Esplin. And so a lot of those sheep would come out there and winter out there and then come back into Utah in the summer. But there would be like 20 different sheep camps out into those hills with, thousands of sheep on each one. When we lived out there, I remember going on a school field trip and out to watch a guy named Yuri Jordan shear his sheep. But
really?
It's been, probably 50, 60 years since there's been sheep out there, though.
Okay, so the whole area is primarily cattle.
Well, that's probably
area.
Yeah, that's a little bit wrong. Probably 45 to 50 years since there's been sheep out there. So now it's all cattle. Yeah,
all cattle, and is it safe to say that most of the other ranchers all across the Arizona Strip are primarily made up of families of generations that have been out there in that country? And so, in other words, most of the ranchers that are, taking care of the land and what have you are people that have been out there for generations. So there's a long history of families that ranch in that area.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay, and then you talk about making improvements and such on the land, and I would ask you, when did your, love for really getting into the trophy hunting aspect of mule deer hunting, when did that really take over for you as far as, was there a definite time when, you really focused on those older bucks, those bigger bucks, and, started guiding and really started getting into the trophy mule deer aspect of the Arizona Strip?
Yeah, I started guiding in like 99. But, over the years when we'd hunt for meat, the first deer we hunted for meat. And then we hunted for horns after that. And my dad killed some big old deer over the years. But it was 99, and it was the draws had started to come out, and we couldn't draw. And so I got where there was a guy that came and had tags, and he wanted to know if I'd take him hunting, and I took him hunting, not for any money at all. I just wanted to go hunting, and so he then wanted to know the next year if him and I could guide together, and so we did that, and then we split up, and since then we've been doing that. And if you want to know his name, I can tell you.
Who is it?
Chad Smith.
Okay,
Chad?
And yeah, I know Chad. And so at that point, so it's like early 2000s, and the trophy mule deer, it's coming on as far as the Arizona Strip has always been known for big deer and what have you, but there has been some, for lack of better term, there has been some commercialization of guiding and such in the Arizona Strip, and there's a handful of outfitters that obviously spend a lot of time on the Arizona Strip, and then they've got yourself, who not only do you guide on the Arizona Strip for mule deer and sheep and what have you, antelope, but you are out there spending time running your cattle as well. How much time would you say in a year? Are you 6 months on out there and 6 months off, or are you 10 months out there and 2 months? If you added up all the time over the last, say, 20 years, how much time do you spend out there on the Arizona Strip?
Well, see, what I also do is I build these wildlife drinkers for the Fish and Game, and so I'm out there with the cows. I'm out there for that. I'm out there for hunting. I'm out there probably 4 to 5 days a week. So
you spend a lot of time throughout the year, all periods of time, whereas some other outfitters are just there during hunting season. I mean, you're obviously there 4 to 5 days a week, all throughout the year, tending to your cattle and building drinkers for the Arizona Game and Fish. The drinkers that you build, I'm going back to something you said. You said if they have a choice to drink between a dirt tank or a Game and Fish drinker, they're going to drink at the dirt tank as much as they can because of safety. Explain to the listeners what you mean by a dirt tank feeling safer to the deer, in your opinion.
Okay, a dirt tank, is usually out in the open, and it's got surface area. It may be 100 and 200 foot wide by 100 foot the other direction, and it usually has a big water lot which keeps the cows, where you can keep the cows in or out, where a wildlife catchment, or a trick tank is what some of them call it, is it catches water off tin and runs into a tank, and then there's a trough that has the water in it. And a lot of the old ones, and since I've been rebuilding them, I've kind of talked with the Fish and Game and have permission out here on the strip to knock a bunch of these trees down to make it safer for the deer. But what happens is, if there's brush and if there's trees right there by that water, I mean, we have trail camera pictures of a lion laying right on the water, and you can see deer eyes, see deer in the background. He's just sitting there waiting. And so it's very dangerous. That is almost it's the most dangerous place for deer is water, because that's where the lions get them. And so a pond is a lot opener, a dirt tank is a lot opener, and there's more area to get a drink.
It makes total sense. It makes total sense in the fact that if it's more open and they have the ability to watch as they come in, listen as they come in, smell as they come in, and as they're drinking, if it's open, something, a coyote or a lion can't sneak up on them. Whereas if it's in close quarters, say a spring or a metal catchment where it's close quarters, they can get ambushed a lot easier. It makes total sense. So let me transition into this question. In conditions, with the conditions the way they are, which I assume they're super dry out there, I assume a lot of the dirt tanks are drying up. Do you think we're going to have more of a predation problem, this summer or this year? Will we lose more deer, in your opinion, this year because of the dirt tanks being pretty dry compared to other years?
Possibly, but I'm optimistic. We get our big storms that fill the dirt tanks in July and August out here, and we actually had a good July and August and September last year, and a lot of these dirt tanks still have water in them. Our summer country, just up there last week checking on it, and our ponds all still have water. And so, and there's a lot of gloom about how dry it is, and we need water bad. But it's interesting how resilient the land is out there, and how it's like the cliff rose. If you go out there right now, it's beautiful. The cliff rose is blooming, and what I like to always do is grab the cliff rose and squeeze it in my hands, and if it's just dry and brittle, there's not much in it. But if it's greasy, it's got a lot of protein in it, and it's still really in pretty good shape. And I was out in the south end of the unit this last week, and then I'm headed to get there again tomorrow. it actually surprisingly looks pretty good. And so I'm really quite optimistic about that we are going to have some good horn growth this year. And so, as far as the predation, I think it'll probably be similar unless we don't get any storm this summer, and then it will make a big difference.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is we're dry, but it's surprisingly, in your mind, it's holding its own, especially on that south end, is what you're saying is the cliff rows. So if I translate that into the deer, do you feel like if we can get, let's say, normal monsoons, July 1st, July 4th, somewhere right in there, and get some good storms, as far as antler growth, do you think, I've heard a lot of people saying they think it's going to be really rough. In your opinion, do you think it's going to be average, below average, or potentially above average for an antler growth year?
I think it's going to be average.
Okay, so you are not of the opinion that it's so dry that it's going to be below average. You just think it's going to be an average year out there on the Arizona Strip.
Yes. And, if we could get a storm here, some decent storms here in the next couple of weeks, it could be a great year again.
Okay. Obviously, you mentioned 2010, a banner year. I believe in 13A alone, I think there was I want to say there was $15 over 200 in A alone that year. Just an unbelievable year. You're not forecasting one of these banner years, but you're thinking it's going to be average. So on average, when you take a 13B on an average year, and these are numbers that I'm just throwing out there, it seems like when I talk to outfitters that they say there's, say $40 or $50 in 13B across the board that are, say 200 inches or better. Do you feel like, this year, with as dry as it is, but with maybe, some of the areas you say holding their own, do you think we can still have that, $40 over 200 type situation, or will it be $40 over 200, but maybe there won't be those $230, $240, $250. Maybe there'll be a lot of $205 to $210 to maybe even high-end type $220 type bucks.
Yeah, I'd say that would be an average year. They're still going to. If you look at what was left over from last year, there was a lot of deer that made it that are going to be big deer. Whether they get to the way high end is yet to be seen, but there's still going to be some big old deer killed.
How do you see, if you compare B and A right now, as far as conditions, is there one unit over the other that is in better shape or worse shape, or do they both seem to be about the same conditions?
As far as conditions, I think they're about the same. A has kind of struggled the last few years of having as good a deer. And this year, the A hunt is first instead of the B hunt, and so they've been going back and forth for that the last couple of years. And the A, so it's earlier and not so much in the rut, but then a lot of those A deer then drop off to B and get shot in the B hunt. So, I think you'd want to have a B hunt this year. B tag.
I'm looking at the regs right now, and it's 13A is November 9th through November 18th, and then 13B is November 16th through the 25th.
Yes.
Even with that A hunt being the 9th through the 18th, that's still for that first hunt. If you follow my logic, whether it be A or B, that first hunt, both of those dates are still on the later spectrum, later end of the spectrum. Do you see possibly that 13A hunt, towards the end of that 13A hunt? I mean, you could probably, if conditions are right, you could probably get some deer running around. That A hunt may actually be pretty good, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I do. I do, for sure. And they'll be, if they're not in the rut, they'll be really staging, and so, yeah, it'll improve well, no, I shouldn't say that. I mean, A is better if it's a later hunt, but.
Right. So what I hear you saying is, obviously, if A was the November 16th to the 25th, it would make hunting conditions and, rutting deer, it would be a better hunt in A. But with that being said, 13B with the November 16th to the November 25th, it's going to be phenomenal, probably rutting type hunt in 13B, correct?
That's the way I see it, yes. Yeah.
And the other thing, Clay, is, we talk about success, we talk about hunt conditions and what have you. It's not as if on those hunts that actual more numbers are going to be killed, but would you agree that those later dates potentially give you more deer sightings, more activity on those hunts? So it's not, you guys, you outfitters up there, you're so good and you know those deer so well. It's not that you're not going to kill that buck that you're after, but it's more like in pursuit of that buck, you're probably going to see more bucks, more does on their feet during daylight moving around.
Yes, that's true. And what happens too is we're good, but there's still bucks that show up that you didn't know about, and when they show up, it's usually during the rut, and so it just improves your odds of finding even something better, maybe, or something that just moved into that area, or come out of the trees, or came to those does. I've noticed over the years, you think, well, the bucks goes to the does, but the does also go to the bucks. It works both ways during that rut, and so they congregate, and they're more. You just see more deer during the rut. But the big buck sometimes may move too. I mean, he may not be right where you were scouting him because of the rut. That can change things too.
For sure. I was going to ask you that. As far as deer that you've scouted out, you talk about your cows. You put them in summer range, and the deer. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the deer kind of have the range that they use in the summer, and then they have the places that they go to rut. On a majority scale, would you say that deer on the Arizona Strip move to go rut? But is there always the exception of that buck that it basically stays in the same spot the whole time from velvet all the way through the rut, or do they all move to go rut?
No, they do not. There's one particular deer that I call him crossover that every outfitter out there has tried to kill for the last 6 years, and that buck only hits the same water. And there's other waters within a mile of there, and he only hits that one. And he stays there the whole time. And some of these other deer, that lucky deer that we hunted and killed, I mean, he lived in a 2 or 3 mile radius all of his life, where a lot of these 13A bucks right there on Logan will drop down off the rim there and come down into B. There is quite a bit of migration, and it depends on the part of the strip you're at. If you're in the middle part, they don't really move. They don't move that far. If there's a mountain range close, they will go up and down that. But the strip is a lot of it, like I say, is real similar country, and so some of them don't move hardly at all. It's just interesting how, and some of them you go, holy cow, he really moved, and It's just interesting the different. I think they're like people; they have different personalities, and maybe they got shot at once and made it, and they're not going. They're staying in a safe spot what keeps them alive.
For sure, absolutely. It's very interesting to see the different, personality or characteristics of a buck and watch how they travel, and hearing the stories that you guys tell up there about some of these different deer are awesome. Speaking of specific deer, over the years you've been a part of killing some of the biggest deer on the Arizona Strip. Is there one deer in particular or one hunt in particular of a certain deer or, following a certain deer that you guys ended up killing that stands out to you as, either A, your favorite, or B, just an unbelievable tale of, mishaps and what have you, and finally, having it all come together? Is there any one deer that, you would call it as your favorite, story of a deer that you guys followed and finally got shot?
Well, there's a couple. I'll tell you the one that's right in my mind the most is the one we killed this year. We called him Traveler, or some people call him the rim buck. We've known of this deer for 4 to 5 years. I have trail camera pictures of him, and I've never seen the deer. All I had was pictures of him. We've hunted him those 4 years and never laid eyes on him. And this year he exploded. Interesting. 4 years ago he was probably a 195 buck, just a good solid, massive, heavy 4-point. The next year he became, probably a 210 buck, and then the next year he's a 220, and then this year when we kill him is a 258. And interesting, they took the tooth out of him, and he's a 9-year-old buck. It takes years to get a big deer, a lot of times, and this buck, I've always really, you get what you want to kill a buck, not because you want to kill it, but just because he's so challenging. This buck lives in a place where it's hard to see, hard to glass, and he knew how to get in the trees and stay hidden. This year Roy Crouch is the one who had the tag. He won the Arizona raffle tag, and we had hunted him in the opening day. We got messed up on another deer, and then came and hunted him, and didn't see him. And then Roy came back another time, and we decided that we was going to take a walk through these trees towards the rim and see if we could just hit some tracks and follow him, because we'd just glass and couldn't see anything, and we hit some tracks and followed them, and found that fresh droppings, and we knew he was close, and I said, just be ready. And he came out of this little canyon and came up and didn't quite give Roy a good shot. Well, we trailed him, and Roy had one of those things that tells how far he walked. We trailed him 11 miles. And that deer, 5 times he backtracked probably 150 yards, and then would go again. And he was just...
So in other words, you were following him, and then he would come back on his tracks, or he would do a button hook?
Yep. He'd go down the they'll go down, and then all of a sudden the tracks would disappear, and there'd be tracks coming back, and you'd have to follow back about 150 yards, and then you'd hang a left or a right, and it was a real education to and really fun to try to outsmart this deer. And
at the time, was it fun, Clay, or at the time was it extremely frustrating? Like, was it fun to look back, or was it at the time you wanted to pull every hair you had on your head out?
Well, it was just amazing to watch how smart he was. But, I mean, we were exhausted. I mean, it was 11 miles and zigzagging, and we had people out in front trying to find him, but he was staying in those trees. And then he'd kind of went back almost to where we had jumped him, and there came probably a 10-minute just downpour, and then it was over, you know. And then Roy went home, and we got onto another big deer, and that deer was near a park, and he jumped in the park, and so then I said, let's go back and hunt Traveler, and I gassed him up just probably an hour before dark, and I found him. He was with a little 2-point, and I was changing from my 15s to my 40s, and then he was gone, and I was panicked, and then and you know, it was just and he's probably half a mile away over on a ridge, and I just kept looking, and he had laid down right when I was switching my binoculars, and anyway, we made a go at him, and it just worked out, and that Roy just shot him laying down right in the neck, and it was just incredible. You know, you walk up onto a deer, and I mean, he has 10-inch bases. I mean, that's as big as an elk. And then I rough scored him, and you know, and you score a deer, and then you think, oh boy, I hope I did that right. Well, we just had him officially scored a week ago, and he was 258 and change. And,
wow.
Netted 247.
For you guys listening out there, make sure to follow Clay Bundy Outfitters on Instagram. And if you go to October 9th, 2017, there's a couple photos kind of in that October 9th time frame, 9th, 10th, and it shows the buck. But man, Clay, he's got giant bases and just kickers off of kickers and trash. He's just a sweet buck. So that 11 miles, when you guys were on him, you said, 4 or 5 times he would backtrack. So in other words, he knew you guys were following him. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. And another thing that was interesting, if you were going across a place where you could trail him, he'd just go straight. If you hit a flat where there was a lot of vegetation, grass, he would he'd try to, he'd go left or right. And I've trailed a lot of stuff, and I'm not that bad of a trailer, but I've just never seen a deer go to that extent to try to get rid of you. And we were dogged. I mean, we stayed on him. It was an all-day trailing. We jumped him in the morning, and it was late afternoon when that storm come and forced everything out.
So let me ask you a question. In a situation where a storm comes, it rains, and you've obviously been following tracks in the sand, in the sand, in the dust, in the dirt, and then it rains. For those out there listening, at that point, I would think it would make following his tracks easier because of the mud. Is that the truth or not?
Well, we were still behind him. You know what I mean? We were like, he could have been.
You could have been a mile behind him, is what you're saying.
Yes, And then with that storm, I mean, you couldn't see tracks anymore. The tracks were gone.
Gotcha.
It was a downpour.
That's why you guys ended up going after another deer, and then you went back after Traveler.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is you were far enough behind him that, yeah, it would have been great if you had tracked him in fresh mud, and you know that you're only minutes behind him. But at that point, you guys were on tracks that could have been, and probably were, hours behind him.
Yes. And it just, the downpour, I mean, you were looking for something to get under. It was
yeah.
We were stopping, quick.
Yeah.
Really got wet.
In talking about tracking, and obviously being a rancher your whole life, I mean, you deal with tracks a lot. What advice can you give to hunters out there, not only on the Arizona Strip, but in tracking in general? Some of the things you've learned when tracking a deer, just things that come to your head as far as advice to people, learning how to track or trying to be better trackers. What advice would you give them?
Well, what you want to know first is how old the track is. And so if you look at, you look and see it, you remember whether it's the wind is blown that night before, or whether there's little critter tracks in their tracks, or how bright the track looks, as far as, you can tell if you look at your own footprint, how, you step out of it and look how shiny or it looks compared to the track that you're trying to follow, and try to get an idea of how old it really is. And then, I've done a lot of lion hunting also, and with, animals a lot of times, you get a track going, and they kind of will go a course, and you kind of get that bearing in your head. And so if you miss a track, you go ahead a little further and see if he's in the direction that he was going there. And if you don't find it, then you come back to the last place you found it and try a different little angle. And, in rocks, it's very difficult, and you may not find the track, but you may find a little rock that's been moved a little bit, and then keep going that direction. And it's fun to. I enjoy tracking. A lot of times it's not very profitable, but it can be. And so it's kind of an art that is fun to try to improve on too.
How often when you're tracking, Clay, are you, or when do you know that a deer is going to slow down? I hear people talking about saying, I told my hunter, get ready, he's going to be close. What gives you that indication usually?
Well, if they're walking, and if they start to meander a little bit, just a little bit, or if you see droppings, fresh droppings, and then depending on where they're going, if they're going into a canyon where there's beds or things like that, that's what tells me he's close. Get ready.
Okay. Very interesting. And then obviously when a certain deer that you're tracking gets within other deer and other bucks, it could become difficult. How important is it to really hone in and focus on the size, length, stride of that particular deer's track?
It's very important, but when you get mixed up with a bunch of deer, then it's very difficult, and it's easy then to quit tracking.
It's to give up, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I heard you say before that like a deer's kind of lined out, you've kind of got a direction going. did I hear you correctly in saying, you can obviously follow and kind of, you've got a path line, or you've got a, even if you're looking on your GPS and you've got kind of a line going, so to speak, did I hear you say that they kind of stay on that line, but be careful that if you lose a track, make sure to go back to the last place you had it, because they're going to veer left or right.
Yes.
But deer that you follow, specifically older big deer, mature deer, do they zig and zag a lot, or do they typically line out from one place to another?
Well, they do zig and zag, but what I'm saying is, like, if you go, you got a track coming between two trees, and there's kind of a for the next 20 yards, there's kind of a clearing. That's probably where he's going to go, and then get to that point, and then, he may go right or left, or he may come to a cliff for something to eat on and stand there and eat for a minute and then walk a different direction. But, kind of anticipate, if you see where he's going and how he's going, you anticipate where to be looking for those tracks, because, it's just like you. If you're taking off walking and there's a brush here, you'll kind of go around it, or, you know what I mean? And animals do the same thing. The path of least resistance. So in other words, what you're saying is, as you're tracking, you're also looking out in front of you on a line that you've been going on, but if you kind of notice that, there's a couple trees on either side, he's probably going to go right through there, and then you just keep following the track. Sure enough, he went right through that opening. Then another opening, you can kind of start getting a pattern of, this deer likes to kind of just pick the openings and head through them like anything else would. So as you're tracking, you're kind of processing not only the track that you're standing on, but you're looking ahead and confirming, yep, he went right through here, yep, he went right through here, so that when you get to another spot, you can pretty much go, yeah, he's probably going to go right through there. Is that what you're saying? That's exactly what I'm saying, yes. They're creatures of habit too, they kind of make different decisions, and you'll notice that the deer will make that same decision the next time he's comes to a certain area, the clearing. So
good stuff. I want to take just a second here to thank the sponsors of the podcast. I want to thank GoHunt.com Insider, and remind you guys, the listeners, that if you're not an Insider member, you can go to GoHunt.com/Insider. You can use the JScott promo code, and you can sign up. When you do that, you're going to get a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card that you can use immediately to redeem lots of great valuable gear there in the gear shop. It's a huge Western hunting resource to be able to evaluate units across all these Western states, and I highly encourage you guys to check out GoHunt.com Insider. Also, Kuiu.com, Kuiu.com. They make the best ultralight hunting gear on the market today, in my opinion. The Outdoorsman's, the Optics Authority, 1-800-291-8065, or outdoorsmans.com. If you use the JScott promo code, you're going to get a 10% discount. And phonescope.com, if you use the JScott16 promo code, you're going to get a 10% discount there on phonescope.com. Clay, you talk about this deer traveler, and it's fun to listen to, you guys up on the Arizona Strip and all the different nicknames that you have for the deer. Would you say that the deer nicknames are basically because you've got so many big deer? If you didn't have nicknames for them, you and the guys that guide with you and your friends and what have you, you'd have no way to keep track of certain deer year in and year out. And is that the main reason that you see of coming up with nicknames for these deer?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can say, well, there's a 5x5. Well, there's another 5x5 down the road. You know what I mean? Right. And so the names are just easier, and different outfitters have different names for the same buck if they know about the same deer. But as we communicate, we can say, well, Traveler or Lucky or Poor Boy or Big Little Heavy. These are some big deer that we've hunted over the years and named, and it just, I don't know, it just, not only does it help know what you're talking about, but it just kind of brings them more to life. They're not just, they're, most of the time, a deer that gets a nickname is one that we've hunted more than just a year. That's really a smart deer, you know, a deer that's a challenge and a deer that's just been really fun to hunt.
You talk about, you talk about the conditions, you talk about it being maybe not as bad as some might think, and you think, you talk about holdover deer. With that being said, I mean, would it be safe to say that there's probably holdover deer that you know about that, let's say they're a 220 buck, that maybe they're not a 220 buck, maybe they're a 210 buck, or maybe they've added one more year of maturity, maybe they jump to a 230 buck. Do you see in certain cases deer, good deer from last year that are holdover bucks that you have kind of your eye on? Do you potentially see those bucks being, some of those bucks being bigger this year, or do you feel like with the conditions the way they are, not many of those deer will be bigger than what you think that they should be?
I think that they're going to be, if we can just get a little storm here in the next month, and then we get our monsoons, they're going to be just as big or bigger this year.
Okay.
I do.
Okay. And then I asked you about some deer. You mentioned Traveler. Are there any other deer that jump out at you that once you got the deer on the ground, say over the last 20 years in particular, any of them that jump out at you that you could tell us a story about that, it was bittersweet almost getting them on the ground after, so much, heartache probably and thinking about one particular animal?
Yeah, it's a buck called Lucky. I don't know if I'm sure you've heard of him. And it was an auction tag. This deer, I had got him on camera, 4 years before that. And I hunted him during the regular hunt, 10 days, just as hard as we can. We hunted him the whole time and never laid eyes on him. The next year, he had got substantially bigger. He was like he was a 250 buck. And I hunted him the whole 10 days, never laid eyes on him. And he only would hit that. He hit the wildlife catchment one time. There was a big dirt pond, big pond that I never got him on camera there, but that's had to be where he was hitting for water. And then we had this auction tag, and I decided to go looking for him the first. It was on, I think, the 14th of July, and I found him, and I got a picture of him. And then I never seen him again until we were hunting another buck, and then you mentioned Breck. Breck got a video of this buck, and so then we knew how much he had grown. It was substantial, and then we came and we hunted him. The first day that we had the hunter there, we could have killed him. He missed the shot, and then it was 20 days before we killed him again. Before we was able to get on him again and kill him. And you talk about bittersweet. It's an area, So for 4 years, I dreamed of this buck. I hunted him. Every time I went to check a camera, it was like anticipation. You drive through that area just thinking, yeah, he's here, he's right here, and then he's gone. You killed him, and it was phenomenal. I mean, he's better than what we thought. He was, just tremendous deer. But I still, when I drive through that area, I always think about him and think, gosh, dang it. It'd be sweet if you're still here too, But,
yeah.
That's, for me, the thrill of hunting is not the kill. I just love the deer. I love the scouting part. I love the getting pictures of them and just being part of it. You know, the actual killing of the animal is not the high to me. It's
the chase.
It's the chase. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned trail cameras, and I know the Game and Fish is. I've been in Mexico for a month chasing Gould's turkey, but from what I understood, they had potentially something on their desk in the last meeting that they were going to talk about doing some sort of trail camera ban, and I had heard that they were going to do, you know, no water sources. You got to be a quarter mile from a water source, and then when it came time to voting on it or whatever, I think they pushed it off to the next meeting. For me, you know, I don't outfit on the Arizona Strip. You know, I've been up there a handful of times and seen the amount of cameras and stuff on the tanks, but and it does cause some squabbles and what have you. But it just seems to me that the most viable solution is to run cameras and just have a date that the cameras have to be pulled off. And you know, then you say, well, there's an archery season and there's a rifle season and this and that. Well, I mean, it seems like rather than just banning them altogether or making them where you can't put them on water, I mean, it seems like you could do, you know, 3 days before the archery hunt or 2 days before the archery hunt, you know, the cameras have to be pulled, or a week or whatever the date may be. And then after the archery hunt, you know, you can run them up until the rifle hunt, you know, 3 days or whatever, 2 days before the rifle hunt starts. And then they all have to be pulled during the rifle hunt. And then once the hunt's over, and then I know you guys run a lot of cameras after the rifle hunt, you know, and you know, catch them during the rut and stuff. To me, it's almost a shame. You know, I know the problems that trail cameras create, but it almost seems a shame that I feel like older age class deer are being harvested because of the trail cameras, because you guys know there's this buck and that buck there. You know, maybe a 195 or 200 inch, you know, 3 or 4 year old deer gets a pass when you know there's an 8-year-old non-typical, you know, old mature deer that you're after. Seems like they should come up with something rather than an all-out ban or a quarter mile from water ban, just a time frame ban. I'm curious, and you don't have to weigh in on it if you don't want to, but I'm just curious your overall thoughts on it.
Well, I totally agree with what you said about the age class deer, because it's just like Traveler, the buck we killed. I wouldn't hunt there. It's a nasty place to hunt. I wouldn't hunt there unless I knew that buck was there. And the only way I knew it was there was because of trail cameras. And so, but part of the problem with what you're talking about, the time, and I totally agree with that, but you got to throw in the auction tag, 365 days.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know what I mean? And the auction tag is probably usually the ones who run the most cameras.
Yeah.
And so I don't know really how to do that. But part of the reason why today is the good old days is because we have cameras.
Yeah.
And so I'm mixed. You know, I one of my biggest frustrations is going out there and having my camera stolen, and it happens all the time, and it's so frustrating. But then it's like Christmas when you pop in a card and you got a Lucky on it or a Traveler.
Yeah.
You know.
So it's I can hear it in your voice. You love and hate them. You love them and hate them.
Yep.
You know, you love them because of the one time you get a Lucky or a Traveler buck on there and the anticipation and the fun that creates. But you hate them when you spend the same time putting a camera up for Traveler or a Lucky, and you get there and 3 of your cameras are stolen or 15 of your cameras are stolen. You know, it creates, you know, fights with other guides and this and that and, you know, jealousy and blah, 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 and it just creates a bunch of nonsense. I wish there was a way that, you know, sportsmen could figure out a way to kind of govern ourselves and make it work rather than have our government agency tell us what we're going to do. That's kind of
That's exactly my feeling, because, I mean, we're in America. We should be able to run cameras if we want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you know, and you hear the word sportsman. I mean, sportsman to me is like someone who is fair and but there's always some bad apples, you know, and it spoils it for other people. So
yeah, and I would agree. You know, you got 98% of the guys out there doing everything right, and you know, would help fellow man, and then there's always the 2% or 1% or 3% or 5% or whatever it is that would like to do nothing but do just for themselves, and that's the unfortunate part. Is that it ends up screwing up. You know, I think a guy like yourself would do just fine if they eliminated cameras altogether, because you know the country really well. You've lived there your whole life. You know, you spend lots of time there. I think the guy that it hurts is maybe the outfitter that spends 2 weeks a year there just during hunting season, you know, during the archery hunt and during the rifle hunt, and the rest of the time they're never there. So, I mean, I see it both ways. I feel like other parts of the state, it would be too bad. I know the problems in 9 or 10 for elk, and I know the problems on the Arizona Strip, what some of those cameras have caused, but then you've got some guy in, you know, just some random unit that's, you know, got his camera on a spring, and he's never even seen another hunter around, and he's having fun running his camera. It's kind of too bad that he's affected by something that, you know, there's no competition for that spot at all. So I wish, you know, hopefully they'll take all of it into consideration and make some sort of good judgment call on it. You know, and it's one of those things. But I'm excited to see, as you are. I'm sure this time of year is always anticipation when the antlers are growing, and probably a month from now you'll know a whole lot more than you do now. But it's always a rejuvenating time of year when the antlers are growing and you have that new anticipation for the coming season. One question I would ask you, as far as passion for the sport, and you've been doing it a long time, does the passion go away, or does it just get stronger and stronger as the years go by with these deer?
Well, you know, the aches and pains are a little bit more, but you know, there's just nothing funner to me than seeing a big deer and getting a live video or a picture of it, and just, you know, it goes back to my dad. You know, and now that he's gone, it's a little different, but it's the same. You know, coming. If I could get a picture and then bring it and show my dad and show him a big deer, it was just like, God, it's just so fun to, you know, see his reaction. And that's where I come back, and, you know, my wife and I had 5 daughters, and they all love to talk deer with me, and they get excited about seeing big deer, and now I got grandkids coming, that, you know, and so it's still my passion, and
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. It's awesome to hear it. You can hear it in your voice when you talk about them, and that's so refreshing to me to see a guy like you that's been doing it a long time and you still just love it. And that's awesome stuff. I can't wait to see how you do this fall. I really appreciate having you on the podcast. I think we covered some good ground. I want to give you a chance to let the listeners know, and I'll also link it up on the podcast show notes. But I think I said Clay Bundy Outfitters on Instagram. But is there other ways that you would like people to contact you?
You know, I'm on Facebook too. My Instagram posts go on Facebook, but also I mean, feel free to call me at my number, 435-680-2991. I mean, I love to talk deer and talk about putting in, and I always encourage people to put in for the super raffle. And So Instagram and my phone number. Please call. Love to talk. And I'm out of town a lot. I'm out on the Strip, and you don't have phone service much, but I always check at night and leave a message, and I'll respond.
That sounds great. Well, I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to the listeners getting to hear this episode, and I look forward to having you on again down the road, and we'll share some more stories, and it'd be fun to do one in person sometime. It'd be a lot of fun to do that and share some more stories, because I know you've got stories of all kinds of situations, even situations unrelated to hunting. I'd love to hear some of the stories about, some of the things you've come across on the Arizona Strip and out in the middle of nowhere. And, I'm sure you've seen some crazy stuff out there, and we'll have to do that another time for sure. And, God bless you, and I just appreciate you taking the time with us.
Thanks for considering me to be on it, and I appreciate you.
All right, Clay, you take care, okay? God bless.
Thank you. See you. Bye.
All right, bye.